The 2003 One Piece movie, Dead End Adventure, was the best in the series up to that point. Toei had proven that they could nail the formula of having likable supporting characters, stakes that fit the narrative, and giving the Straw Hat Pirates their own moments to shine. When 2004 rolled around, One Piece movies were still releasing annually, leaving Toei in a position where they could easily prove that Dead End Adventure's quality was either because of their studio or in spite of it. It would all come down to One Piece: The Cursed Holy Sword is the fifth movie to come out in the series, released in theaters across Japan on March 6, 2004. This was 2 years after Toei had ceased their biannual anime fair, meaning Cursed Holy Sword was the second One Piece movie to release on its own and not as part of a double feature. What makes Cursed Holy Sword so special, though, is as of now, it is the final One Piece movie to release with a paired short in theaters. Take Aim, the Pirate Baseball King. It's another 5-minute short in the same vein as Dream Soccer King, only this time, it's baseball. Also notable is this time the Straw Hats are going up against Arlong's Fishmen Pirates rather than a collective of miscellaneous villains. Oh, and Gonfal is the umpire for some reason. And all of the dialogue is done by Bon Clay, who's doing the announcing with Buggy. The plot is as follows. The Straw Hats and the Fishmen are playing a game of baseball, only instead of regulation balls, they use iron spike balls. First up to bat is Luffy, who's facing the wrong way and is granted a base after Arlong aims for his ass. Next up is Zoro, who strikes out in one swing using his 3-bat style to cut 3 balls at once. Luffy tries to steal a base and gets tagged out, to Coach Nami's disappointment. Up next is Usopp, who runs the bases without even hitting the ball and almost scores a point, if not for his lengthy nose. Next is Sanji, who's too enamored with Nami to make a proper play. That's 1, 2, 3, 4 outs? It's time to change places. Zoro's 3-mid style fails to catch Arlong's hit, and only Robin's Devil Fruit is able to keep it in the park, allowing the Straw Hats to get all the Fishmen out. Eventually, it gets to the final inning. Straw Hats up to bat, and the score 0-1 in favor of Arlong's crew. Robin, Sanji, and Zoro are all on base, and Luffy is up to bat, facing the correct direction this time. Strike 1, Luffy didn't swing. Strike 2, the bat shattered. Left with no other option, Luffy uses the third pitch to unleash his ultimate baseball weapon, the Gum Gum Home Run. The Straw Hats make a 4-point play, Buggy is knocked to pieces by the home run, and everyone lives happily ever after. There wasn't a reveal that this one was a dream sequence, so I'm going to choose to believe it's all canon. Being another 5-minute long short, the only things I can really say about it is that it's funny. I guess it's also a bit of an odd choice to have the Fishmen Pirates as the opposing side, given that I'm pretty sure Arlong hasn't even been mentioned since the end of the East Blue over 100 episodes ago. Actually, that makes now a good time to mention something that I wanted to mention during one of the Arlong Park shorts that I accidentally deleted the original clip of when I meant to include it as bonus material. Arlong is the captain of the Fishman Pirates, yeah? So he has his subordinates tattooed with the crew's logo, like poor Nami, who was branded for 8 years. But him and at least his top brass all have a second shared tattoo. To me, that implies that Arlong and his men used to work for a bigger, stronger Arlong that they defected from while keeping the tattoo tradition. It would make sense why they fled to the East Blue, since Fishman Island is reportedly halfway across the Grand Line, while Nami's village is presumably somewhat close to its entrance. Conspiracy tangent over. Back to baseball. I was a little confused the first time Nami spoke in the short, since, again, all the dialogue is done by Bon Clay, but when the joke hit, I'll admit, I laughed. Also, the fact that they're all playing on a giant roaming baseball field ship is very funny. Do you have 5 minutes to spare? Go watch the actual short. Multiple people have re-uploaded it to YouTube, and honestly, just telling you to watch it is the best review I could give it. Other than that, by all accounts, it was a pretty standard film release. To give context for the state of the anime when it came out, episode 184 broadcast the day after it released in theaters, the episode that now knocks Luffy off the Arc Maxim, and 11 episodes before the end of Skypiea. We open on pirates attacking a village, gravely injuring a man named Saga who can barely fend them off until he finds a mysterious sword and, as 4Kids puts it, locks them in the dungeon. Cut to the Straw Hats in a restaurant discussing how the island they're on has a legendary treasure, a mysterious 7-star sword. Everyone is there except for Zoro, who gets a surprise knife with his name hurled at him, and Usopp, who is still giving his best to fix the Mary. But the Straw Hats have to flee from Drake. Remember him? Well, keep him in mind for a little longer, and are forced to go inland to avoid abandoning their swordsmen. Flying over a ramp and bouncing off a strange creature's back, the Mary lands in sight of a mysterious girl returning from a dive with 3 sphere-shaped gems. The same girl Saga was protecting in the opening. Her name is Maya. I forgot that when I was writing this. We're just gonna call her Gem Girl. Having pirate-related trauma, she immediately flees, only to be pursued by Luffy, who accidentally tugs Usopp along in pursuit of Zoro's whereabouts. While Luffy and Usopp get lost in the woods, the rest of the Straw Hats end up at the girl's village, and only manage to avoid starting a conflict by the Marines and Zoro showing up and starting one first. Zoro mysteriously attacks the Gem Girl, injuring Sanji, who protects her, and steals the 3 gems from before. Meanwhile, Luffy and Usopp wind up at a Marine sword fighting dojo, where all the Marines have a non-standard outfit that I actually kinda like better than the normal one. Luffy does as Luffy does and tries to Luffy Saga right off the bat, only to be forced off a cliff by the magic sword. Usopp bravely follows of his own volition, avoiding death using his parachute. using the trees to break his fall. Back with the other Straw Hats, they make friends with the villagers, and Robin reads the local runes to learn the history of the Seven-Star Sword. Flip back, Usopp finds Luffy's hat and then falls into a cave. For a pretty decent chunk of the rest of the movie, those two will continue to have misadventures, finding traps and obstacles throughout the cavern, and every exit they find leading to an odd tower. It turns out Zoro and Saga have a pretty extensive history, having gone to the same dojo as kids and reconnecting briefly in the East Blue. Zoro dumps the gems he stole into a well that leads deep, deep underground, and it turns out Saga is possessed by the evil sword. You see, the Seven-Star Sword started off as a symbol of the island's royal family, until the island's three princes all fell in love with the same priestess and waged literal war over her, using the sword's power. This corrupted the sword, and the only thing that stopped the war was the priest girl sacrificing her own life. And without the gems, the only way the sword can be stopped before the blood moon the next night that would boost it up to full power is for Gem Girl to sacrifice herself, because she's a descendant of the original priestess. I don't know how that works, considering the priestess was presumably single. Well, I guess. Some bullshit happens, and Luffy and Usopp literally erupt from the ground, carrying the gems with the convenient knowledge of the locations of all the towers the gems have to be placed in for the ritual to stop the sword. Things go conveniently well for the Straw Hats as they set their plan in motion and erect a bubble around the island to stop the sword from gaining its full power. Meanwhile, Zoro is fighting for his fucking life. The Seven-Star Sword needs a worthy sacrifice, and Saga thinks that Zoro is the only one who fits the bill. Zoro ends up losing the first confrontation, but the ritual to stop the sword is already in motion, so Saga goes to put an end to it, and succeeds in doing so. The sword manages to not only completely possess Saga, but awaken its full power, and even Luffy fails to defeat him. Well, less fails and more lets Zoro take him on because this is like a matter of pride or something, and Luffy respects that. Zoro defeats Saga, dispelling the evil sword's possession, and everyone lives happily ever after. Standard disclaimer of I oversimplified a lot of that applies, but even more than usual this time because this was a convoluted one. Cursed Holy Sword reminds me a lot of Chopper's Kingdom on the Island of Strange Animals, because I didn't like either of them very much for very similar reasons. Much like Chopper's Kingdom, Cursed Holy Sword suffers from choosing one of the Straw Hat crew as the character to center the story around. In doing so, the writing is forced to present a dilemma that allows the crewmate, in this case Zoro, to meaningfully overcome it while simultaneously being meaningless in the long-term impact of their character arc. What does Zoro learn in this movie? Don't trust childhood friends if they've been possessed by a magical sword? You should always try to save your friends from being possessed? Speaking of, the magic sword itself is another strike against Cursed Holy Sword. The introduction of a new power system and its corresponding mythical object of choice that exists exclusively on a singular island and will never be brought up again is something that didn't work in Chopper's Kingdom, and it doesn't work here either. If magic swords, gods, and holy magic all exist in the world, why have they never been brought up before? The closest thing to a god so far in the series is the god complex ridden Enel, and Nolan's mini-arc was pretty explicit in the worship of gods being ineffective. Speaking of ineffectivity, the villains are also a big issue. Only one of the secondary villains gets fleshed out in the slightest, and the top henchmen are literally all treated as a joke for the Straw Hats to effortlessly defeat during the climax. The main villain of the movie isn't even the actual main villain. Saga is just a mouthpiece and body being possessed by the Seven-Star Sword. Being possessed by a sword isn't a good excuse to write your villains to be flat and emotionless. Let's try looking at things from a thematic perspective. A staple of One Piece, and really just writing in general, is having an antagonist that embodies everything that you want to be against in your theme. Emperor Palpatine is an authoritarian dictator, manipulator. The Terminator is the end goal of developing autonomous war machines. El Dorado was greedy and valued gold above all else. But what does Saga stand for? The Seven-Star Sword uses him and his marine company as puppets in its quest for power after he uses it to protect the woman he fell in love with. Coincidentally, the Seven-Star Sword was corrupted when three brothers fought for the love of said girl's ancestor. So does the Seven-Star Sword stand in for controlling your toxic relationships? No. In fact, the Seven-Star Sword does its best to eliminate the priest girl, and her love isn't what brings Saga out of his mind control. It's Zoro killing him. It almost reads like the theme of the movie is, "Getting possessed is bad, you shouldn't do that." That being said, I did like a few things about the movie. Luffy and Usopp make a great duo whenever they're together, and I'm glad to say that this is the first movie to take full advantage of that. Pairing those two off to explore the cave system is an A+ move. The choice to have Zoro finish off the final boss is also a good subversion of the already well-established Luffy saves the day trope that every arc, movie, and special so far has followed. When Luffy doesn't have direct ties to the villain, it feels odd to have him essentially complete another character's arc. Well, this is usually covered by giving the supporting characters a secondary trial to overcome, like Vivi stopping the fighting in Alabasta, or second example, the narrative of Cursed Holy Sword doesn't leave room for that. So solving the issue by simply having Zoro finish things off instead of Luffy serves the narrative well and puts the movie a step above Chopper's Kingdom. Other things I like than that are, I guess I like this gag where the old lady is actually super tall. That's pretty funny. The art direction's pretty nice too, I guess. It doesn't really do anything new with the One Piece style. It's mostly just adopting the same moody atmosphere and darker shading that Dead End Adventure had. If I had to make a recommendation, just skip Cursed Holy Sword. It's inconsistent with One Piece canon and really just not well written in general. I do have to give the movie props though, because it didn't include the arbitrary child sidekick. That's all I've got for this time, but if you want more, you can check out all of my standalone One Piece movie videos here in this playlist. Or you can check out my full saga coverage videos that bundle all my shorts, movie reviews, and special episodes together in one place. I'd like to extend a special thank you to everyone who subscribed to my Patreon page. If it weren't for all of you, I wouldn't be able to make the one block vertical jump for beef. That joke is definitely going to be dated by the time this video releases.